Just trying to get the energy level up.
Welcome everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show, where we have a smart aleck in our Professor Emeritus of Ken Dean in Athens, Ohio. Thanks everyone for joining us. So tonight we're going to be talking about what to look for in an indoor air quality monitor. So the first consumer grade ones came out in 2016. Well, the first big round anyway of the internet connected ones. There were some before, like the Dylos had been out for a while, but they weren't particularly common. So we'll talk about what to look for in those from both a professional standpoint and for homeowners, or for those of us pros that just want to kind of screw around and learn some things, what to look for in a device for our own personal usage. So, and tonight, joined by Mr. Pain in the Neck Ken Dean, Tanner Dickerson down in Alabama, and TK is out traveling. I don't know if he's going to be able to talk much because his mic stinks up, and he's going to be in and out.
Dropped it again.
Yeah. So that's the wonders of traveling, which I'll get to learn soon enough, because we are taking off in our camper in a month for about 2 months. So that'll be fun. I'm in the middle of doing a build on that. So anyway, let's just get on rolling. Oh, and then Jeff's back. There we are. Jeff, hi.
Uh-oh. Nate, you've frozen for me.
Oh, great. Well, I'm back now.
Yep.
So, yeah, maybe we're going to have all kinds of fun tonight. I was on IAQ radio on Friday, and it was a little bit messy, unfortunately, because Joe Hughes, the host, kept going in and out. And it's like, well, I can run the show talking, or I can run the show as an interview, but it's tough to keep going back and forth. So hopefully we won't have that happen. Anyway, so let's just dive in. We'll pull him back in. So last week, we talked about Tanner's fantastic article, Clearing the Air, about air purifiers. And basically, we came to the conclusion that the only safe one that we have to work with is a good filter. Everything else is questionable and might do more harm than good.
It's BS.
Yes. Lots and lots of BS there. So this week, we aren't really talking about BS, well, unless we're actually talking about building science. But this is something that I have dug into, being indoor air quality monitors, since the beginning of 2016. The AWAIR, AWAIR, was announced in 2015, and I was really excited about it because in our home performance projects, we wanted a fast feedback loop to understand if something was working. And it was pretty hard to get real-time data out of houses. And, we could make energy predictions and wait a year to see if we hit them, but that kind of sucked. We wanted a faster feedback loop to understand if we had hit the target or not. And lots of clients had various air quality challenges, primarily humidity, but sometimes there were other things as well, but you didn't know until you monitored. So this whole round of devices came out in 2016, and I put out the first comparative review. It wasn't a perfect study by any means, because I didn't have any money. So I was just procuring the devices whatever way I could get, and then waiting for things to happen, and then seeing how they reacted. So this is in our living room and house a couple of houses ago now. And I just donated this desk. It's kind of funny. But this turned out to be my favorite, the Fubot, which isn't on the market anymore. This is the first generation AWAIR. This is the spec, not made anymore. This is a carbon monoxide detector. This is a radon detector from AirThings. This is a NetAtmo. That's just a temp and humidity monitor. This is a crummy little Chinese thing that a client gave me because he said it was junk. Yep, I confirmed it was junk. It did not. It would tell you nothing was wrong, nothing was wrong, nothing is wrong until like all the other monitors are going off, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, it's 10 times worse than what the other ones say. And I'm like, I can't trust you. So it was terrible. Second spec, actually, Dylos, which is a pretty cool product, but you have to plug it into a PC to get the data off. And it holds 2 weeks worth of data, which that is a break in what you're looking for. That was annoying. And then this is a Green Eye, which does CO2. So a bunch of different stuff. And these all measure different things. So like trying to compare these things was interesting, to say the least. but it did that, and I was very happy. This Fubot came out winning in my various tests, basically burning crap in the kitchen and seeing what reacted. Or we painted the front porch and spiked VOCs for a couple of weeks, or my neighbors would burn something outside and the smoke would come in. These are the events that I was catching. But LBNL, Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, did a study shortly thereafter, and they agreed that the Fubot had the best results. And I'm like, all right, it's always nice to figure that out. Here's a question coming in already. Heating, cooling services. Does anyone have any experience or looked into the Broan Overture system for automated fresh air ventilation? Were they the ones that bought Fubot? Because this device is still made, but I can't remember where it is right now. And the curse of that is, I think it just looks at CO2 and opening things up. I don't know that it gets into the other pollutants, but I'm not sure. Do you know anybody? Or heating, cooling?
I do not.
Nope.
All right. Anyway, just giving a little bit of bona fides there, which is that I don't truly have bona fides, but I've been looking at these things and playing with them for a long time. We had 40 Fubots in the field measuring at one point, so we got to learn a lot from that.
They were good for measurement, but they wouldn't perform anything. They wouldn't activate anything.
Yep, you could use if this then that, but the protocols were terrible. You couldn't adjust anything, and I don't know. I played with them. I had them turn on a filter fan with a smart outlet, just out of curiosity. So there's a whole Corsi Rosenthal box. I learned from several people years ago to duct tape media filters to fans, and when it detected a bunch of dust, I would have it trigger that. I was like, well, it worked, but how do you make if this then that work with 220 powered devices? And now you can, but I wasn't trying to figure that out at that point. Anyway, our usual intro in the HVAC 2.0 way of thinking. We have this kind of unusual philosophy of not my circus, not my monkeys when it comes to helping clients out. We want to make sure that we are staying outside their problem and helping them as consultants figure out how are they going to deal with various things. This can be very hard. I definitely felt pain on this front, and part of these rules are in place from things that I learned with indoor air quality monitors. Don't own more stuff than you can control, or it will bite you. Ken, like you were saying, like you can't control things with the air quality monitors. Yeah. That was how Badass HVAC got developed, actually, because I gave up hope on being able to actually directly control air quality. And so Badass HVAC is a system that does a pretty good job of managing indoor air quality all the time, but it's not truly smart. It doesn't do anything extra when something happens. It just does a decent job of keeping everything clean. But when we are in client homes, they aren't our homes and it's not our money. So it's important to remember that. And there's a new slide that I just made for this week. There's a pretty stone in the cemetery next to our Airbnbs that has a serenity prayer on it. So God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And in my mind, fundamentally, what this comes down to is the only thing that we can truly change is ourselves, and we can only have influence on others. And that's a lot of what we think about philosophically with 2.0. So we help people understand what their root causes to issues are if they want to. Sometimes they don't want to pay to figure it out. And then we help them figure out how do we solve that. And we give them different options, and then we let them choose. All right. So enough on that side of things. So what to look for in an indoor air quality monitor. And this is keeping professionals in mind. So I like to start the shows with kind of the conclusion, and then we'll kind of chip through a whole bunch of different things. Like to dig into the details of it, and then we'll come back to this at the end. So for professionals, what we learned from playing with all of these air quality monitors is the few things we wanted to be sure that we could read all the time were PM, particulate matter or dust, TVOCs, total volatile organic compounds, temperature, and humidity. Preferably humidity and dew point, which Fubot implemented like 6 months before they pulled it off the market. In fact, it might have been 3 months. I remember being like, woohoo, I finally have dew point. And it was gone.
Mhm.
Carbon dioxide is nice to have, but it's secondary. The good CO2 sensors are pretty expensive, so it will add a solid $100 to the product. And at that point, we're pushing beyond the $200 or $300 that we can pretty easily get people to pay. And then nobody's going to buy it, and it's not going to end up happening. So, like an example here, I like the IQ Air monitor, but it doesn't do TVOC. So it gets kicked out on this. I've got one sitting next to me. I watch it actually all the time. It's got a nice screen on it. Another thing you want is reasonable accuracy. The first generation Aware, like none of their sensors were good. I didn't trust the particulate matter, the VOC, the temperature, or the humidity. The CO2 seemed okay. But when you're comparing a bunch of different sensors and you see when one thing is lining up and another isn't, that's very frustrating. So these are low cost sensors, so this is not going to be crazy accuracy. We're generally looking for trends. Is it high, medium, or low? So like you don't want to focus too heavily on the exact readings, but if something's going on, you want to take a look at it. Next thing is you want to have a Wi-Fi connection, not Bluetooth. So a number of the devices only have Bluetooth. Let's see, where did I set the dumb thing? I had it on my desk earlier. Here it is. So this is Nair Things. You can see like I've got a bunch of these things. I own a ton of them. This only works with the Bluetooth. So while it will store 2 weeks of data on it, if you don't log into the app and get the data off of it every 2 weeks, you lose the data. And if you're doing long-term monitoring for clients, that doesn't work. Plus, you aren't close enough to use Bluetooth. So you can't use this as a pro if you're helping clients. It's fine if you are just trying to understand what's going on in your own home. Long-term placement is also critical because you want to be able to see trends. Things vary from season to season. They just do. Summertime, you've got the doors and windows closed, so your carbon dioxide levels typically go up. Your TVOC levels can go up because you've got the air conditioning running, but when it's not running, they're going to be going up generally. Spring and fall are oftentimes humidity and TVOC nightmares. Wintertime, it's dry, so TVOCs usually aren't too bad. You usually have a lot of stack effect going, so carbon dioxide may not be a big issue. So if you pull a 30-minute measurement in May and then another 30-minute measurement in, say, December, those are not comparable. You need to understand what's going on. And I say 30-minute because that's what Air Advice does for the most part. You couldn't, Jeff, can you still leave them for long-term? How long ago was that you did the ones that we're going to look at shortly?
It's been a while, but you still can leave them long-term. Okay. They have long-term reports if you set it up right.
Got it. But the curse of that device is they're like $2,500 and then like $1,000 a year to keep. So that's not something you're going to use oftentimes, and you don't want to leave that behind for a long time because it's not going to make you money. You're not going to be able to charge a client what it costs you to leave those things. So long-term placement is key so that you can see trends. You really want a professional dashboard so that you can see multiple clients on it. If you have to log in and out of every single client, it sucks. Don't do that. You're just not going to do it after a while. You're going to get annoyed. I have to do this for the Bryant thermostats for the systems that we've installed. I don't look anymore. I just don't care. I learned what I was going to learn, and I just don't go look. The only one that I look at is the one that I left it signed in on. So, Peter, I drop in on your system every so often. One day this winter, I should turn it up to like 80. Just mess with them.
Log into Amazon and order a bunch of things for him.
I can't do that through his Brian account. But anyway, yeah, I do not touch thermostat settings, by the way, just to be clear. That's not cool. That'll get you in trouble. But you need a professional dashboard where you can use one login to see a bunch of different accounts. And then this is the one that didn't exist for a long time, the ability to control devices. And preferably with dry contacts, that's how you control HVAC devices. So 24 volt on off dry contacts. This is something that just didn't exist, and I had frankly given up hope. And so Fubot did all of these except for the control. And then they went off the market, and nothing else, not a single product that I could find did all of these. So I just kind of gave up on them in like 2018, 2019. And then Haven came along, which, by the way, Lucy Cameron of Haven is in here. And they're not sponsors of the show, but, we work with them routinely. And she says that carbon dioxide is more important once it comes time to setting up the mitigation, maybe less so during the initial diagnosis. So yeah, I can see that. Like I asked both Kevin and Ben, so Ben isn't there anymore, but he was on their technical side. Like, if we got a CO2 sensor in there, what would it do? Like, well, it would add about $100 to the product, and that just makes it hard to sell at that point, because it's already something that people don't necessarily care about that much, at least not enough to monitor. So that's a challenge. But carbon dioxide, that's a really common thing from the commercial side, because it's a decent proxy of whether people are in the building or not. We're going to talk about proxies.
Yeah. Ken Gehring's a big fan of having CO2 monitoring.
Yep. Well, I understand. I like it too.
Ventilation. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get to why we don't worry about that as much in a minute. So that's for professionals, these things. You want to measure the 4 things: accuracy, Wi-Fi, long-term placement, a pro dashboard, and ability to control devices. Those are the things you want for pros. Now, for homeowners, or for those of us that are just screwing around in our own homes, that's the great way to learn building science in my mind. Be careful experimenting on client homes. Don't try like really new things in client homes in general. Do that in your own house. Just piss off your wife. It's way easier to deal with her than it is a ticked off customer, because you can always just go turn it off, whatever it is you did.
Yeah, but you can always just leave the customer.
Yeah. There's pluses and minuses to both sides, but it's pretty easy to just put something back if it doesn't work. All right, so it's really just the 2 different things at the end that changed. So dashboard is for understanding readings and trends. An app on your phone is oftentimes adequate for this. You don't necessarily have to have a web app and be able to log in and look at a bunch of them at the same time. That's nice, but you don't have to have it. And ability to control devices, this isn't critical at that point if you're just trying to learn and understand. And a lot of them will use if this, then that, if anybody's played with that. Tom, yeah, I'm just not going to put that one up for now. We're all going to laugh at it. So, YouTube chat. All right. So I wanted to touch on this. This is what kind of spurred this thought process of doing this episode last week, after Tanner talked about the different air purifiers. This is an article that I wrote back in 2018. So April 2018. We've been thinking about this for a long time, and our thinking had coalesced at this point. So this is 5.5 years ago now. To Catch a Health Thief was the name of this article. And what we talked about in this is basically everything is a proxy. So a proxy is a metric or a thing that stands in for something else that's usually larger than what it is. So like you can vote by proxy if you own a stock, something like that. Or in this case, what we're looking at is TVOCs are a proxy for air quality. So we don't know everything that's going on, but volatile organic compounds and TVOC sensors, they measure a fairly broad array of things. And oftentimes they're cross-sensitive to CO2, or if nothing else, they are cross-sensitive to the chemicals that humans put off, which acts like CO2. So this is what I've noticed with both Fubot and Haven. When CO2 readings are low, TVOC readings are low too. So it's a proxy of what it is. So CO2 is really only looking for one specific chemical, and I'd prefer to have as wide of a sensor as possible to understand if there's multiple different chemicals going on, because we don't know that the air quality is good. We just know if that particular sensor is measuring that or not. Is it there or not? That's kind of what's going on. And pay attention to this little thingy here. So this is something else that we learned, is that low resolution is what catches thieves. So where it's nice to have the fancy $50,000 reference instrument. None of us realistically are going to use that. That's for laboratories.
Mhm.
It just is. I didn't have one. I didn't have access to one. I wasn't going to do any of that stuff. One of my clients worked for one of the labs, and they actually measured his house. They had a whole trailer sitting outside of his house with tubes running into the house, running air back through to run them through sensors to understand what was in his house. So there was a trailer with like $250,000 worth of sensors sitting in his driveway to understand what was going on. None of us are going to do that. No one cares. They just don't. So we can't get the super high resolution readings like those are. But I mean, thieves get caught. I mean, now cameras are actually halfway decent, frankly, but for a long time they were crummy. But like my wife got hit in her car by someone, and the cops managed to track that person down from the license plate, which they could just barely read on the grainy video footage, and they tracked him down, and she got paid. So that was kind of cool. But this is what really catches thieves. So we don't necessarily need really high resolution data and like really super accurate data. We just need to understand, are things getting better or worse over time? High, medium, low. Are things changing? Have we made things better? So between everything as a proxy and low resolution, this was me pushing for consumer grade devices being useful, because initially the air quality researchers, a few of them like them, and most of them are like, that's crap. They were being purists, which I can understand because they had access to $50,000 reference instruments. Like, that's nice, dude, but I don't, and you don't want me to borrow it. So I want to be able to help clients and understand. And the question that I really gave them was, would you rather have no data or some data? And on the some data, if there is some kind of reasonable certainty of accuracy, or just knowing that something's going on, is that good enough? And that's what I did with that desk that had all those devices on there. I wanted to understand what was actually measuring things and what wasn't. So could I trust the readings or not? That's what I wanted to figure out. And the Fubot won, and then it came off. What's that, Ken?
All we need is the trends. We don't need to, when I would equate high resolution to full home performance bonehead. Having to learn everything about it, we really just need to see which direction are we headed. Are we going in a good direction or a bad direction? What can we do about it?
Yes, exactly. And did we win the war or the battle?
Yeah.
What's going on? And that keeps life interesting. And this is where measuring before and after is really critical. So you want to have a device in beforehand and then see what happens afterwards. This is one of the things that I really like dropping the Fubots for. So when I was doing the home performance consulting, Energy Smart Home Performance, at the Comfort Consult, what we now call a Comfort Consult, I would drop this. Or sometimes when I came for the full audit, I'd drop it and it would live there for a month, and then I'd get to pull the data from it, get to watch what was going on and understand what I could recommend to them or not. And it wasn't from just a snapshot. It was a month of data usually. So but before and after, and then if they did the job, I'd leave that in their house still, and we would get to see after we did things if we improved things or not. And that was a really fast feedback loop, because sometimes you could see the changes in hours from doing things. And when we first started doing this, one of the first things we did was Ecobee thermostats. So this is from a tool they don't have anymore. So they had a commercial dashboard where we actually bought commercial EMS units and we put them in homes because we could log into a whole bunch of them at the same time and see what's going on. So we were trying to solve that same problem back then. This is Ted. That was his thing, and he was dead on. But this is an air conditioner of one of our case studies, 3-ton air conditioner. You can see that it's barely running. So these are design days when this outdoor temperature coming up high. These were a couple of design days back in 2014. We've been playing with this for a while, trying to understand how to do all this stuff. His air conditioner was running for like 4 hours and shutting off. Does that mean it's oversized? Yep.
Betcha.
And it shouldn't have been just kicking on these little bits here. It should have been kicking on at low level earlier and running all day and not letting the house lose. But this one was actually pretty well insulated by the time we were done. So it heat soaked the house and then it turned on the air conditioner. So it turned the AC on at night, basically. But this was us trying to figure this out. And this is the interior humidity. Look when the air conditioner runs, if you can see the gray, it comes down very distinctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, there's another run cycle and it comes down distinctly. So that's what we're looking for. But this is a single stage air conditioner. We didn't touch the HVAC on this house. All I did was put the Ecobee on. And I also learned how to blow a fuse. So that cost me to pay a friend to come over and figure out what I wired up wrong in the Ecobee. Here's Fubot. So like I said, it did all of the stuff that we wanted, but it's off the market. This is before data for TVOCs. So all over the map. This craziness, this is during the install because some of the caulks that were being used to seal up the air handler were just stinky. So they were off-gassing quite a bit and kind of messing it up in the house. But look what happens to the TVOC levels once we turn the system on. So this was a dehumidifier, and we went from a single-stage air conditioner to a two-stage heat pump on top of a furnace. Everything pulled down. And the PM levels did the same thing. The PM levels were all over the place. And then after the project, they just flatlined. So these are still a little bit bumpy. Oftentimes, I think this was cooking, if memory serves. So they cooked a lot, and they didn't have a range hood that vented outdoors very well. So that was a lot of what was going on. This was a mold-sensitive client, and this made it so he went from not being able to live in the house to being able to live in the house. But we got to watch this happen, and it was like, holy cow, this is amazing. And then another one, Lucas, who's a good friend as well, he moved back into his house after a foam job, and I had him leave windows cracked so that there was just some extra ventilation in the house. And I watched the TVOC spike on my phone, like watching while I was actually at a conference. And I texted him and I said, "Hey, did you close your window? How did you know?" The TVOC levels just went crazy. It's not time yet. You got to leave them open for another week. And okay. And he opened it back up. So it was a really fast feedback loop, and you can tell when something's going on. I came to really strongly trust the Fubot, and like it goes 3 orange lights when things are bad and 3 blue lights when it's good. And my daughter at 2 would see the Fubot at orange and be like, "Fubot angry." My wife got used to turning the range hood on every time she was cooking so that we didn't make the Fubot angry. So how do we do that sort of thing? These are the things that it's useful, at least as we learn. For clients, I'm not always 100% sure that we even want them to know what's going on, because it just causes frustrating calls that we can't necessarily deal with, especially if something's like out of calibration or something like that. Anyway, Jeff, I wanted you to hop in here because this was kind of a fun story that you had using Air Advice.
Yeah, so this is with the Air Advice, and this was back in 2019, so 4 years ago. That's how long ago that was, Nate. That's what I was looking up there. And this was a before project as well. And what we did is we left this in for long term, and you can see the particles were constantly high. But left it in for about a month before we actually started the project. So the next slide will show after we finished up the project, what was actually happening with that control.
So before, you were like never below 10, hardly below 20.
Yep. And then what would happen here is you could see the spikes that would go up. And again, same thing like you just said, times that they get home, cooking, everybody getting in the house, and then it would settle back down. So things can get out of control. It's just getting them back in control.
Yeah.
And this kind of shows that right here. The next slide is the fun one. So we start getting here into winter, and what happens middle of October, they start actually running fires outside. And where they put their new fire pit happened to be right around the corner from where the fresh air intake was that we just put in. So look what happened. Look what happened there. So that was a fun one. You live and you learn. that's one where you probably do want to tell them, you know, and educate them a little bit to not put the damn fire pit on the corner of the house where the fresh air vent's coming in.
Right.
So on this one here, we had to go back with a damper and control and had them shut things off when they actually were in fires to get back under that control point. So that was a learning curve right there, right? But it was fun to see the actual data.
Well, you got the fast feedback loop, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. Yep. Left it in for a couple months just to get this data.
I love this comment. Hey, Susie. So everything my husband spends time in the restroom, or every time I think my husband spends time in the restroom, my Ecobee warns me about the air quality. Yeah, they do have one now that I think has an air quality monitor in it.
TMI.
I think any of us who have played with one of these have farted on it. It definitely pisses off the Foobot. But then again, breathing in the Foobot does too, because our breath contains TVOCs and humidity and sometimes particulates. So if you breathe on a lot of these things, they'll get mad. But yeah, I definitely think back to Felicity at age 2. Foobot angry. I mean, she was barely talking, and she knew how to read the air quality monitor. Kind of funny. Now, I wanted to talk about control, because this is what we now have with Haven, which is very nice that this is an option now. So you're not going to use this all the time. You may not even use it often, but boy, is it a nice tool to have in the tool bag. So this is a central air controller, and this actually, they did this wiring diagram for me because I was the first one to try to do this. Like, I want to make it control a damper. Well, we don't have a wiring diagram for that. So I go back and forth with Graham and tech support. And he sends me a diagram, and like, I'm kind of an idiot with these things. And I'm like, well, I'm still a little bit confused. Like, wait, I think I can do it better for you. And he sent it over, and I got it wired up, and it worked. I didn't blow any fuses this time. Because I'm not a tech. Again, it's not what I do every day at all. But this is pretty nice because it will connect to their monitor, and then you can set up all kinds of different triggers for when it will open or close things. So in this case, I was having it open not one, but 2 outdoor air dampers, something I'd always wanted to do. I like Joe Stiebrick's idea of ASHRAE 62.2 is just too much air for the most part. It's usually double, triple what you actually need all the time. So Joe talks about run 50% of ASHRAE 62.2. That's the standard for residential outdoor air ventilation. Run 50% of that all the time and have the capability of doing 150%, which is not that easy. So there's some high-end ERVs that have multiple fan settings, but we've talked about ERVs in the past and how they end up being expensive. They usually don't get maintained, and they can also outrun your dehumidification capabilities and actually make things worse, ironically. And they don't really save any money at the end of the day either, because those 2 fans run all the time. So anyway, this ran with 2 dampers and put these into our Airbnbs here in West Virginia, connected to a couple of 1.5 ton Daikin fits. This is what they look like in one of them. So these 2 lines are going outdoors here. This is the drop. Tanner did the duct design on this thing. This house is amazing, super comfy. The only exception is, well, it's not really anybody's fault. It has a French door, and sometimes it'll get cold next to that in the wintertime from air rushing down the glass. But it's a giant glass wall. It is what it is. You're going to have a weakness. But in any case, these are 2 dampers. This is the Haven controller, and you can't quite see the monitor. You can see the wire headed down to it down here. But this will open these 2 dampers. And when I put this in, they didn't have any controls yet for dampers. So I told one that it was a dehumidifier and said open if the humidity is above 15%, which in our climate it is. Let me check always. So I just made it be on all the time. And then the other one I set to turn on whenever TVOCs came out of normal levels or low levels. And that did the job. So this was nice to have to do this. The bad part is, the dike can fit here does not have the reheat dehumidification capability. So it was fine as long as we had daytime highs 75 and up. It would generate enough runtime to actually control humidity. But like now we're getting into the season where we still have 65-degree dew points, but there's no cooling load. It's 70 degrees during the day, 72, something like that. So the houses get damp. So I have a dehumidifier running in here that runs its brains out this time of year. And you always want to have one of those as backup, but it's nice if you don't have to use it very much. Oh, check it out. So Lucy from Haven popping in here, now supporting both normally open and normally closed dampers. That's nice. I think it ended up working with mine. I can't even remember which ones they were. But pretty kind of funny there. Let's see. Susie's still going over a chat. I use Home Assistant with Ecobee. It goes off the charts. That's funny. But this is the only product on the market presently that actually meets all of the things that I'd like a piece of equipment to do. And I think all of us here are in agreement with that.
Yep.
So I was super excited for air quality monitoring, and then it just turned out to not be that useful because in general, it was like a car alarm going off where you're like, well, somebody just go shut that off. I don't even care if their car's getting stolen. Just stop that noise. And so the air quality monitors will go off like something's wrong, but there's no way to actually fix anything. So it's not useful. You need a full feedback loop of something happened. And if you don't have the equipment to fix that, well, you can offer what that is. If they do have the equipment, now you can use this to turn that equipment on, whatever that might be. So this will run ventilating dehus, this will run dampers, it'll run ERVs. I don't know, if you give them suggestions, they'll probably put it on the roadmap. So,
Which one that I did on my house is I was kind of wanting something similar to what you did this one when we designed that, of having 2 fresh air ducts, one all the time and one as needed. But what I did is I was kind of just testing it out. So far it's worked good. Is just use a fresh air ventilator and have it to where with it hooked in straight to the return, when the system would run, it'll pull air through that ventilator all the time. So you get a small amount of fresh air all the time. And then when the Haven triggers it at, medium TVOCs or whatever, then it'll kick on that fresh air ventilator. And last time I checked, it was moving about 65 CFM or so. And it's dialable, so you can adjust that as you need it and such. And so in a situation like that, that's something that works pretty well. And, being able to tie the Haven in with the controller, I mean, that's really where the secret sauce is at, to where it actually does stuff, some form of automation.
Yep. Yeah, and to a large degree, the homeowners don't even need to know what's going on.
Exactly.
It's just automatic. I mean, our cars are constantly adjusting and doing things. We don't know what's going on, but they just do it. And I hadn't put it together, but Susie's husband is in here too. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, this is nice because it actually covers all the bases. And here's the dashboard, like I talked about. This is a screenshot of one of our Airbnbs, and this is looking at, it says the last couple of months there. Yeah, that is the last couple of months. So you can see various things going up and down. So these are when guests are there generally. And it definitely looks like it is basically cross-sensitive to CO2, because when we've got a bunch of people in there, it opens the dampers. The funny thing is, you can see one it thinks is a dehumidifier, and the other one is mechanical ventilation. I told it was an ERV, is what I did, and to open that when the TVOCs were high. So it shows that they're on all the time here. You have to zoom in pretty tight to see where they aren't. Did I put that in? So the last day, you can't even see it in here. You have to look at the last hour before you can see what's going on. In fact, let me flip over. Let's look at the last hour. So this is live, or it was anyway. I have to click refresh, 7:05 to 8:05 tonight. But so you can see the dehumidifier, which I told to be on whenever it's above 15%, it's on. So it's doing what it's supposed to. And the mechanical ventilation, the ERV, it's turning on and off depending on what's going on. So yeah, there we are. So there's some TVOC. Probably have a guest here right now. Although this is the older house that we did, and this is the one that had a nightmare basement. I joked the basement was a river runs through it, but without Brad Pitt, because there was constantly just the stream of water running through the basement door. It had a door outside. Everything here is built into a hill, being West Virginia. And it scared everybody away. And I looked at it and like, well, I don't know exactly how to fix it, but I bet I can fix it. And we worked through everything, and man, we stopped 4 different water sources getting in there, and it was still running. I think there's a spring underneath there. So what we actually did is put some plastic down on the floor, and also broke up the floor some so it would allow some to flow out, because the concrete floor that was in there was sloping into the basement, not out. So it got a puddle in the middle. And we put that plastic down, poured more concrete on top, and then we allowed that water to still come out. And so there's still a stream depending on the season. It's not all the time, but definitely sometimes. But that house has been a frustration on the TVOC front and on the mustiness front. So as much as we've done to it, keeping it dry and keeping it pressurized, it's still not perfect. It's getting better and better, but it's taken a year for all the building materials in there to dry out. So that's not an instantaneous thing. But I just thought it was interesting that you had to zoom in this close to see where it's not opening both dampers all the time. Because pretty often when I go in there, they're not open. But if you zoom out a little bit to like the last 2 weeks, you'll see that they're both. It looks like they're both open, and also it looks like the air handler is shutting off. And actually, it definitely will do that because I just changed it from medium fan speed to low because I thought it was too noisy. And then there's other little things that I did wrong in this install because I hadn't really done one before. So I put it in after the fresh air intakes. And also I put it in a place where it doesn't get very much velocity coming through it. So it oftentimes can't tell if the airflow is on. And another bad thing is it ends up getting dust and dog hair stuck in it. So I have to pull the thing out and run a Q-tip through it sometimes. So things are imperfect. But these are all the things you just learned. So, I mean, this is just real world.
Yeah, it's not spending a bunch of time trying to enlarge returns to get that air slow as possible, just to be like, crap, now it's causing problems with my air quality monitor.
Yeah, well, the house next door, I don't think it ever realizes that there's airflow happening. Because you want to talk about filter face velocity and like, well, we're trying to get it under 500, and at full speed it's like 70, and at low speed it's like 15. It's like it doesn't get much lower than that. You can't even tell it's moving, which is a problem when you have an airflow sensor in something where it's trying to understand what's going on. So yeah, it is what it is. And all of this goes back to, if you're trying to control air quality, these are the 6 things you're trying to make sure that you can control: load matching, filtration, dehumidification, fresh air, right place at the right time, or now I call that mixing, and humidification. And these tackle the 3 pillars of indoor air quality, Tanner, which are?
Humidity control, filtration, and fresh air.
You got it. So filtration, humidity, fresh air. And that is done with badass HVAC, as we call it, or nearly perfect HVAC is the consumer-friendly name. And we prefer that with a heat pump because you can do reheat dehumidification. So this is what you're leading to. But basically, if you sell the system and you're putting in one of these air quality monitors, you're likely to be in decent shape. Not for sure. That's why it's nearly perfect, because the house might be screwed up, behavior might be bad, or there may be like a whole bunch of dehumidification that you have to do that you can't with that system. They're not perfect. All right. I didn't mean to present that much. So, guys, what do you see in this list that stands out to you?
One thing I also think, as far as reasonable accuracy, I think it might not be as much of like focusing on the accuracy, but
Mhm.
rather it being precise. If it's,
Yes.
if you have an accuracy tolerance that's pretty wide, because we're saying reasonably accurate, well, that doesn't do anything if that jumps all over the board
Yeah.
and stuff. And so, because I mean, really, a lot of these types of things, like you've already mentioned multiple times, it really comes down to looking at trends and trying to line that up with any behaviors that's taking place at the time to be able to draw a line between the two dots. Well, if you have instruments that aren't very precise and you have volatility between it, it can be very difficult to do that, because that's really what it all boils down to is, okay, what are we picking up and what's happening? Not necessarily of what exactly are the metrics, it's just what is the difference? What's the potential that's going on there, and how does that react? How does that line up with things taking place? And easy examples are, okay, we we're cooking at the time, or somebody's taking a shower, or everybody's getting in the bed at the time. And so that type of thing.
And do you want to talk about what the difference is between accuracy and precision?
Yeah, I can. So accuracy, well, actually, I'll start with precision. Precision is, if you think of it like, imagine a target. Imagine you're throwing darts on a board. Precision is if you throw 3 darts in a row and they're in a very tight group. Now, that precision might not necessarily be on the bullseye, because the actual placement of where they're at would be, if you're an accurate dart thrower, you're going to be hitting bullseye. But if you're not precise, you're going to kind of be all over the board sometimes. Precision is actually hitting consistently in the same spot, so it's repeatable in what it's actually doing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I definitely think a lot about the targets, and yeah, it's if you get similar events, you want similar reactions.
Yes.
And some of the devices that I saw, like that Chinese one that my client had already decided was a hunk of junk. He's like, I don't want to hear you take it. I'm like, okay, I got a whole bevy of these things. I'll plug it in and add it to the mix. I'm like, yep, piece of crap. It'd be nothing, 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 and then we're all gonna die. And there was no in the middle, and we're all gonna die was like in the middle for where the other ones were alarming. And I'm like, so this is not actually useful, but in a way, it makes sense because that was made for the Chinese market, and the Chinese city air is just bad. So, um, that might have worked for their market. It just sucked for ours, when you don't necessarily have significant air quality issues all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And when you start to control things, the precision becomes even more important, because it's really relatable to, um, like, there's something called precision rifle shooting. It's kind of like people shoot, at long distances, and you're having to make, very long shots. It's very difficult, and you have to be very precise. Well, in shooting that type of thing, one of the things that they have to be able to do is when they shoot, if they miss, if they're inaccurate, they have to be able to go, okay, where did I miss? Make adjustments based off of that.
yeah,
Well, if you're not precise as to where you're hitting, and there's other variables that's causing that to be off, well, then you can't make reasonable improvements to then get to where you need to go. And so if you start controlling things and it's all over the place, well, then, you know, your TVOCs are actually reasonable and your humidity is in control, and it's trying to bring in fresh air when it doesn't need to. And now your humidity jumps up because you're bringing in outside air and it's, very humid,
yeah,
and you can start running into more problems than what were there to begin with before you ever tried to do anything like that. So I think it's important to really consider, before you do anything, recognize, okay, let's try to keep this as simple as possible. And because I've seen several people, they start to try to take different devices and get very sophisticated in their control system to make them talk to one another and do different things and trigger stuff. Well, the problem with that is you get too complex, then you take it out of the realm of repeatability and actual usability, and it becomes things that isn't actually useful, because something that you can only do once is basically useless. If you can't do it multiple times over with
yeah,
ease, then you basically wasted your time with whatever you're doing, unless it's just a one-off. I'm just working on just my house.
yeah, yeah. But what you're talking about there, that's science. I mean, if you can't repeat an experiment, it's not good science.
Yes.
That's the whole point. All right, can I set up the same experiment and get the same results?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was one of the things that I was looking for, and that's like what drove me nuts. I was so excited about the Aware, and it's beautiful. It's this nice wood box. It's got this nice screen on the front, and it really tickled the aesthetes in me because I do care about aesthetics. And it was a piece of garbage. It was just terrible. I have a second generation one now, and it's not bad, but I'm still pissed. I know I need to give it up. Like I need to just bury that hatchet. But man, I was just so mad that it was not repeatable. I could just never trust the readings that were coming out of it, and that was very frustrating. That wasn't what I wanted to learn. I thought the Foobot was hideous. I didn't like it. And then I fell in love with it over time because it was a better instrument. So yeah, there's got to be the repeatability, or it doesn't matter. And it's frustrating too because there's all of these devices out there, and one actually does all of this. One. That's really annoying. There's another one that I actually just bought one today. I was talking to Jeff earlier, putting a couple of these slides together, and let's see. Actually, I'll just come here. Wanted to pull this up and give our buddies over at TrueTech Tools some props, and also hopefully a sale or two. So this is one that I'm curious about. This is battery powered, supposed to have Wi-Fi as well. And this is the update of this one here. But this also picks up radon. So it does radon, TVOC, PM, which they didn't have PM before. And so I'm just kind of curious to see what it is. So I actually just finally bought one today. This one I think this would be okay, I think, for personal use. So I'm going to try this and see what happens. I'm going to buy one, and I'll just put it in our camper as we go, because we're going to be disappearing for a while. So I'll put this on the wall and drive my wife bonkers. Open the window, darn it. Oh, it's funny. I think we're actually going to bring a dehumidifier. We'll see. There's one in the tub all the time, because with the campers here, we're about 300 feet lower than when you go up the hill. Usually it's 1, 2, or 3 degrees cooler here. So we hit dew point all the time. And if you just leave something sit here, it will literally rot. It's just impressive. Our little old camper sat without a dehumidifier in it for 2 months last year, and it was an absolute mold farm inside. It took me 2 days to clean the dumb thing out. And all it did was sit there. It's like there was no water in it. It wasn't leaking. There was nothing wrong. It just sat there, and it turned into a mold farm. Yeah. So this is a really challenging climate to try and keep things. So I have.
Welcome to the South.
Yep. Yeah, there's a dehu in that. There's in the casita. There's a dehu in our new camper. There's a dehu in the little thing that we hope to use as an Airbnb. There's a dehu here, and there's a dehu at our camper that we run as an Airbnb. So there are 5 dehumidifiers that I own within 150 feet of where I'm sitting, all running. That's how much you have to work to keep these things going. But anyway, if you get one here, the code HVAC20, HVAC20, will get you 8% off, so you can save a little bit of money on that. Yep. Thank you, by the way, Jeff, for hopping in. Like, I was going to get one on Amazon. He's like, "What are you doing? TrueTech sells those." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And I went over there and snagged one. So we'll see how that goes. But this one, I think, for personal use may be of interest. But otherwise, seriously, the option is Haven. So love it or hate it, but at least they're really trying to improve the product. So generally really like it. And Lucy came in here from Haven and commented on what you were talking about earlier, Tanner. 100% about accuracy and precision. Classifying sensor performance needs to be ongoing and looking into how that sensor performs over time. They definitely do drift. That was another thing I liked about Foobot, was they took drift into account and they actually programmed it in. So I had a couple that were starting to go crazy on TVOCs. There was one in particular that I had when we painted our front porch and spiked it. It never came back down to normal. And a couple of months later, they redid their algorithms, and all of a sudden it came back into normal. So they recalibrated that one when they saw that it was out of whack. So that's what Lucy's talking about here too. It's expensive and labor intensive though, which is why a lot of companies probably won't do it. So, yep. It's a tricky thing to do. So the air quality monitors, they're useful for learning a few things, but boy, if you don't run them for a long time, they're just not that useful.
Yeah.
I don't want a snapshot. One thing that drives me nuts about Air Advice is they generally have the strong focus now on a 30-minute snapshot. And you can find something, but you could either get a false positive or a false negative really easily. And that's frustrating to me.
Yeah.
I want to have enough data and enough time frame to understand what's normal and what's not.
Would you say that short-term readings is probably the biggest misconception of air quality monitors? Of that, if you can just get, if you just go test, like, because a lot of people, especially in the HVAC industry, everybody's so used to single point testing that it's just you go get one metric and that tells you a lot. But with, air quality monitors, I mean, that's just one of those things, like you said, are you getting a false positive? Are you getting a false negative? And how can you correlate that to anything if you don't actually see how the house kind of lives? Like, how does it change and what's the dynamics and stuff?
Yeah.
Because that's how you zero in on issues. Because if you just go test and go, oh, yeah, there's a problem. Okay, so what? We just start fixing every single problem and spend $100,000? Or do we try to narrow in as to where exactly, the biggest, issues are going to be to where we can try to blunt that?
Yeah.
One thing with Air Advice that I will say though is if you're, say you use it every time you go out to the same client's home to do maintenance or whatever, you can start to actually build that long-term report that can actually start to give you some things to, hey, let's pay attention to this. Let's pay attention to that. So, I mean, there's kind of two sides to it, but obviously the longer data that you have, the longer data set, it's going to be more accurate and we're going to have better results.
Yep. And also I should mention, I had an AirThings, which actually Matt Golden gave to Ted years ago. And then Ted gave it to me and I paid for the subscription for a year. And I learned a lot from it. But I also learned that driving out to drop something off, getting it plugged in, coming back and picking it up. And at that point you had to use a modem, which you needed a home phone. So I'd walk across the street to my neighbor who was 80. And I'd be like, hey, Dover, I'm here. Can I borrow your phone again? And we'd chat for a little while I uploaded the data. Because I didn't have a home phone. Like, why? So that was just kind of an annoying thing. And then at $700 a year, like I barely charged enough to just make the $700, let alone my time for driving back and forth. I'm like, this is a pain in the butt. And then it would only be there for as long as I could drop it. So I'd leave it there for a week, maybe two, something like that. It wasn't going to be there for months. And now that they're $2,500, $3,000, $1,000 a year, very, very few companies or clients are going to be using that device in that way. They're going to use it for the quick hit, which I don't want to say it's completely useless because you may find something, but you don't know if it's that false negative or that false positive is the problem. You need longer term data to have any certainty. So if you use that to maybe get some kind of a baseline and then put something in, maybe.
Yeah. And Lucy, she made a good comment in regards to that as well, because that's kind of where my mind goes to it is, okay, well, what's going on at that time? What season is it? What time of the day? Like, there's so many different factors that you could go into a situation, and really you could be going into a situation where, let's say it's springtime and they like to keep their windows open. So of course it's going to be a high humidity. So that makes sense. You're going to correlate that to being normal, but the TVOCs and the PMs also low. And then you leave and they close everything up and then problems arise. So again, it's like we've said multiple times, you got to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So these things are definitely a double-edged sword using air quality monitors in general. So my biggest suggestion would really be get one for your own personal home and learn. Use it to understand what's going on. You're going to figure out that, like, when you vacuum, it stirs up a ton of dust. If you cook and you don't turn the range hood on, things go crazy. your humidity is going to go up if you don't run a bath fan if the bath fan is invented outdoors. So you're going to learn a bunch of these things, and it's useful to have that knowledge in the back of your mind as you're out there trying to help clients. But it may be overkill, too much information.
Yeah. Well, I would say probably the biggest risk is going to be overpromising, because it's easy to kind of start to think about this and to apply like a theory in your head of, okay, well, obvious if we can, if we measure this and we see this problem, we just need to bring in fresh air. And it's like, okay, well, maybe, but depending on what the problem is, I mean, it could be better, it could be worse. I mean, there's so many other factors that's playing in. We can't just narrow things down into, if this happens, then this is the definite thing that has to come afterwards.
Yeah.
It's like if you're not really in it, and it takes some kind of measuring several houses, watching the monitors, and just seeing how things work, just so you can realize, oh, this stuff is so, like it's so dynamic that things change and you never understand it. And it takes time to kind of make sense of as to what even happened, if you do. And so you really have to figure out what you don't know and what you're probably not going to know. So you can kind of like bring yourself down from okay, measuring's great, but it's not the whole picture. So we got to use it in an effective way, not in a way that we go overpromise. Because if you overpromise, you're going to underdeliver, and everybody's going to be mad.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, because you get to where, well, it's the top of the Dunning-Kruger. That's the first one, the Child's Hill, where you're like, hey, I understand this, I know it all, and then you get the crap kicked out of you for whatever reason that happens. And you learn, oh, well, maybe no. And you get to the other side where after you fall and you come back up, you get to the trust me, it's complicated side of things. But you have to learn to understand that. So running these in a couple houses can be really, really useful to understand what's going on. Is this something you want to run all the time? I'm frankly not sure. I'm just not. But I think it's an important thing to offer. And with the Haven, the controller side of it, to me, is actually more interesting than the measurement at this point, which is kind of funny. And I think Ken, are you coming to that conclusion? I think, Jeff, you are too.
Yep.
You can overkill information for clients.
For sure.
And one thing that I've struggled with, well, I still haven't played with it. It's funny. I need to adjust a whole bunch of things on these two installs, move where it is so it's not picking up outdoor air and outdoor humidity. It actually is in the airflow stream, so it picks up when the air handler's running or not. But also, I've struggled with calibration on it, where I kept going in and the Haven's telling me I'm at like 70 or 90% relative, which you can really feel. Like that feels nasty and gross, and you don't want to be in that environment. And the thermostat's telling me, 50%, 45%, or sometimes a 60. Because in the game house, it's basically an apartment over a garage, and when you open the garage and it's humid outside, boom, like you just totally stuff that thing full of latent load, the humidity that it has to then take out. So then, you'd see a spike, and it would take it a couple of days to grind that out before I put the DHU in. But it was consistently showing that the readings were too high. And I've seen that with a few clients as well. Now you can calibrate it, thankfully, but for a while you couldn't. And it was annoying to me because it's like, well, it looks like I'm doing a bad job. It's showing everything's bad. And I'm like, it's not bad. It's fine. So it can be dangerous showing your clients everything. It's better to use it as a controller. And then for us as pros to look at periodically and see, has anything changed from season to season? Do we need to do something else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and which another thing I just thought about, and people will probably wonder about this. I know Ecobee now has indoor air quality monitors built in to their thermostat.
Yeah.
Honestly, which I've only seen one installed. I've not actually installed one to see if there's anything on the back end that actually tells you anything. But just from looking at just the thermostat itself, it looks basically useless, because the TVOCs and the PM is basically just a red, yellow, green. That's it. It don't give you any numbers. It doesn't tell you what these things mean, like how drastic is yellow, how drastic is red. And so another, which would seem to be an obvious, which is actually give data. At least make it to where it's, achievable to get to. But it seems like Ecobee's like, oh, just trust us.
This was earlier, and Randall and Susie are both gone now. But it sounds like there is something on the app where you can see that thing hit over 100,000. So I don't know exactly what it was measuring, but that doesn't sound good. So maybe there is something in there. But yeah, the colors can be useful as just a general idea, but it is important to have more.
Yeah. Well, you need to be able to actually get to it. Like if it's not, if it's hidden data, then that doesn't do much good. But like for a homeowner, sure, they just want to see, okay, are we in the green? Good. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
But if there is something where it's in the red and you're going to try to, dig into that, well, you kind of need to know what those numbers actually are, because that's how you can start to see the trends. I mean, red could be just slightly within the red, or it could be through the roof. And so you kind of need to know that.
Exactly. And wouldn't surprise me if in Home IQ, where you can see the cycles, that it would be on there as well, charted. And by the way, Lucy coming in from Haven, we're pushing big updates to our humidity and temp sensors soon. Just finished a big round of testing to characterize some different scenarios. So yeah, and I've known that's coming. And Tim, I don't know if we're supposed to spill the beams on this yet, but I heard Haven is working on an integration with AirThings. Yeah, I've heard some things similar to that. Can't confirm or deny. Yeah. But what is unusual about the Haven is that it goes in the duct. So you actually drill a hole, and it's you basically stab it into the duct. It's about that long. So it measures kind of an overall average of the entire house. So if you have a problem in one specific room, you need a room sensor. And so doing an integration, frankly, makes so much sense. And everything seems to be, what is Tim? It's just what I heard. Lucy's like, damn it. That would be wonderful, because I bugged them about that years ago, actually. Like, I think it's going to be important to have some room sensors as well, and they were considering making something, but I think it's better just to integrate with one of the manufacturers that makes good stuff. All right, I guess it's all beans are being spilled everywhere or something. So anyway, the Haven is pretty nice. Gavin's in here too, CEO of Haven. Don't put him under the bus.
Sorry, Kevin, it's too late.
So I already heard the thump thump and the beep beep. The bus is pulling away, but that's a good thing. So that if you have a client that you're really trying to understand what's going on, and you have an idea where the localized problem is, you can put it there and figure out what's going on. So this is all for detective work at the end of the day. And like the HVAC 2.0 Comfort Consult is the beginning of detective work, where you might do that sort of thing. For most people in a free quote, probably not.
Yeah.
Although we do offer, we have it built in to offer air quality monitoring as your top tier in a free quote.
Yes.
Yeah. And which one of the good things, I think so, people may disagree, but things like AirThings, if you have like an integration in that regard, it gives the homeowner the ability to start like gathering data themselves. And so, a lot of this types of stuff,
Yes.
unless there's a severe problem, odds are the homeowner, the value to them is not going to be what it's going to take for us to go do this like level of work. So the cost that we would have to charge somebody to go out to do all this type of work, they're not going to want to pay for it. So if they can do a lot of this up front themselves, and then just kind of pass this data on and say, here's what's going on, you just have a whole lot more data to work with at that point. So then, if they buy Comfort Consult, and we have more things to look at to kind of put together, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're going to deal with, the HVAC system, the house, that type of thing. And that's really where, us as contractors, that's where our meat and potatoes is going to be. That's where we need to focus on, not, trying to figure out how do we go do air quality diagnostics for $150. Like, it's just not feasible. At that point, it's just sales calls, and you start mixing that into it, and then it can get a little hairy.
Yeah, and that goes into part of the comfort consult, which is the 4 levels of recommendations. So level 1 is free to $200, something to try, and it's nice if there's an air quality monitor. You can be like, try this out.
Yeah.
Because level 1 and 2 are fundamentally about helping clients basically spin their wheels, because some people need to decide if this is worth it or not, or dig into the problem more. So you give them some suggestions of things they can go try and learn on their own, or try some things that don't need to be undone, like that they don't have a bath fan and it's not vented outside. All right, that would be level 2, because that's up to $2,000. Get a bath fan installed and vented outside, and you could try turning that on as it's bad ventilation, that's depressurization ventilation, but it's better than nothing in a lot of cases. So you can try that, and that lets them spin their wheels and decide if they want to come around and actually do more. And like you said too, if they're learning through air quality monitors what's going on, they're going to be able to tell you a lot more about what the problems are when you come back, because nobody knows a house better than the owners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jeff, it looks like you were going to say something there. Nope.
No,
we're not we're not psychics as professionals. Like we've got experience, we've seen a bunch of things, we've seen patterns, but we don't always know if something is an issue or not. And we certainly can't tell you specifically in many cases exactly where different problems are without a fair amount of testing and diagnosis. Whereas a homeowner, you're like, yeah, it smells funny over here, or it squeaks when I'm over here, or I noticed a rat running in here, or a mouse running in here, whatever it might be. Homeowners usually have a pretty decent idea of what's going on in their homes if they're paying any attention. And so we want to make sure that we take that knowledge into account when we're trying to help them out with various things. Anyway, I hope this is somewhat helpful. And anybody else have some other thoughts to throw in here, or stories, examples? All right. So these are the key things to look for, just to close it out. So what to look for in an indoor air quality monitor for professionals in particular: you need to have PM, TVOC, temperature, and humidity. I do not view any of those as negotiable. And that kicks out a huge chunk of devices. Carbon dioxide is nice to have, not utterly critical in our experience. Commercial, that could be another thing, but this is residential. You need to have reasonable accuracy, or as Tanner said, actually reasonable precision. When you get the same events, you want the same things happening. You want to have Wi-Fi connection, and it needs to be a pretty decent Wi-Fi chip, so it's not going in and out. I have a Sense Energy monitor in Ohio, and I just left the damn thing in the panel because it kept disconnecting. And I'm like, you know what? You can have it. It would just lose a month at a time for no apparent reason. And they're like, well, you don't have it set up right. And I'm like, well, it's got a Emporia View in there, which has dropped exactly 0 ever. Don't look at me. I know it's not ideal. It's in the box. Where it's not perfect, but it's in the middle of a freaking interior wall. What am I going to do? So the Wi-Fi connection is important, that it's reliable, and that can be an issue, to be sure. And you don't want Bluetooth, because you have to connect to the device to download data. And if you're a pro, you can't do that remotely. Your homeowner clients have to do that. Need to be able to put it in long term, so months, if not years, preferably, so you can see the trends and understand what's going on. You need a pro dashboard so you can see multiple clients, which hardly anybody has. And the last one is the killer, which is the ability to control devices. So you need to be able to turn things on and off when things go sideways. And basically right now, this leaves Haven. Wouldn't surprise me if there will be some other ones coming, but Haven's been working on this, and serious props to Haven. And again, not a sponsor, but they're really trying to figure this crap out. And so it can be a useful thing for difficult situations. But like we were talking about also, there's more stuff you need to know. Like, I really want to understand the leakage in the house. What's the overall leakage? Which rooms leak more than others? Do we have moisture problems in one part of the house or the other? Like, we need more information to give something that even approaches an accurate diagnosis. but at least the measurements help us understand the patterns of what's going on so that maybe we can figure out the causes. But these are all the things you need for professionals. And for homeowners, you don't worry quite as much about the last two. So a dashboard is just there to understand the readings and trends. And ability to control devices isn't necessarily critical, and you can oftentimes use if this then that if you're a nerd, but that's definitely early adopter stuff. I played with that with Foobot and just kind of abandoned it. I didn't think that their triggers weren't adjustable enough. They were just too wide, and I didn't find it useful. And so that's what to look for in an indoor air quality monitor. So hopefully everybody got some value from this, and thank you to the Haven folks, Lucy and Kevin, for coming tonight, and for everybody else coming. And we'll see you next week as soon as we figure out what the hell the topic's going to be. So thanks all. Appreciate you. Oh, wait, we got one last question coming in here too. So that's good. Heating and cooling services. What if you have a house with ductless splits and you installed a ducted whole house ventilating dehumidifier? But I put the Haven in the return for the DHU. Thoughts?
I mean, if that return is only coming from the house, then sure.
Central area.
Yeah, then yeah, sure. Of course, then the question has to be, what area is that dehumidifier serving? If it's only serving a small section, well, then you're only getting measurements from a. But
yeah, and to be clear too, I would put that in the return duct that is from the house, not in the fresh air. If there's an option there, if dedicated return from living area, which there probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is the workaround, doing a ventilating DHU with ductless splits.
Mm-hmm.
Because I almost did that with the house. Well, actually, that's in this picture here. This had baseboard heating and a fully finished basement. And it was built in 1835, and it was a real nightmare to scab ductwork into. And one of the reasons I got rid of it is I wasn't going to be satisfied if I put mini splits in. But the DHU, which I left in Ohio after selling the house, I bought that for this house so I could do exactly that. I could have some control over air quality with that device. Not perfect, but something. And never did end up hooking it up for that because I sold that house too. We seem to have a problem with that. To control air. Yeah, so heating, cooling services and to control fresh air fully ducted. So there we go. So yeah, that'll work. That's funny. Ted's hopping in here. So here's a total non sequitur. Who's the ideal HVAC 2.0 free quote prospect? I think we're going to talk about that in the after party. But that should be darn near anybody, frankly. As far as like running a free quote, you can run anybody through that.
Maybe he's suggesting that for our topic.
I think he probably is. So because Ted's Mike, he's on vacation, and it was very. I'm losing you. It's like, yeah, that's not going to work for the show. All right, so heating cooling services said it's still in the works, either getting rid of the mini splits and installing a conventional system or adding whole house ventilating DHU with a duct. Does anybody here prefer anything involving ductless mini splits?
No.
It's what you need when there's nothing else.
Just for a room addition. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only place they belong.
Yep.
And even then, they're going to be a problem.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody here, after watching with air quality monitors, is a fan of mini splits.
Yeah,
you just get into problems.
That's right.
Anybody that's ever serviced one and had to clean one, I mean, you should. I mean, even like the carriers or the bright ones. I mean, they're easy to take apart and clean and stuff, but it still sucks because it's like this thing's just disgusting. Like, why? This is dumb.
There's something, probably not a whole episode, but there's that. It's a cover that goes on the mini split I got an online ad for it today. An air purifier that you put over your mini split.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. But back to this question. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to do what you can do, which is offer prices and options, pros and cons, and let your client decide. So if they pick the mini split and the whole house dehumidifier, just make sure that you have them sign off. We understand that this may not be able to solve all the problems. And we own that.
Yeah. Well, the
Do
first
not-
question is, why are they asking for a dehumidifier to begin with? Like, why are you there? If you have mini splits and it's heating and cooling, why am I here? What's the reason? What's the purpose? And then go, okay, well, if you're trying to solve for X, Y, and Z, well, then if we do this top tier option, we got really good odds. Anything under that, we're going to start giving up cons. And so are those cons worth the price savings?
Yep.
And understand that.
Love this. He doesn't want to keep the mini splits either, but it's what was installed. I'd hate to trash tens of thousands of dollars of Mitsubishi equipment, but I probably will. I hate this. Like, Mitsubishi makes really good stuff. It's really reliable. I hear great things about it. It doesn't dehumidify for shit. It just doesn't.
Come on, tens of thousands of dollars. I've told you a million times not to exaggerate like that.
Yeah, it's really frustrating that mini splits are so difficult to do that with. And that seriously was a decent reason, one of a bunch of reasons we sold the house, where these air quality monitors are. Like, I could spend 50 grand on a half-ass solution and forever be annoyed that I couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to do. And it was like, you know what? Let's do another house. It was a gorgeous house. I loved that house. It was a great house. But good God, was it difficult to get the right HVAC in it. And I wanted to electrify it. It also was a fully 5-ton load house. You know that we're particular on how we get there. That was an honest to goodness 60,000 BTU heat load. And there was basically nothing I could do easily that didn't cost $100,000 to pull that down. So, like, EXO insulation, we modeled it. It would save $250 a year and cost $100 grand. Like, I'd like to retire someday. So we sold the house. It was really comfortable. It was a great house. But anyway, okay. With that, thanks everybody for coming. And hopefully you know what to look for in an indoor air quality monitor now. So we'll see everybody next week. Thanks again.
See everybody.
Sign off.
Night.